Okay, I'm going to call our, geez, that's pretty good. I haven't heard this yet. That was interesting. I'm going to call our January 9th Village Plan Commission to order. Roll call, please.
Chris, before roll call, staff would like to give a few instructions about the new meeting, new meeting technologies.
You don't want to just do that right after roll call?
Well, you need to know the technology for
Okay.
roll call. So for the meeting, microphones are going to be automatically on mute. When the light is red, you know that it's muted. And our advice, in order to have the best recording quality, if you're not speaking, have the mics muted. So the important point is when the roll is called, press your button to go green to identify that you're here, and then back to red. And make sure you continue that habit over the course of the meeting whenever you desire to speak. Now, I understand you're going to forget from time to time. We'll get there. This is going to take some learning for us to all be ready and rolling with it. Staff just had their first kind of sample dummy meeting this morning. It was a couple hours that felt like 20 hours. So we have some learning to do, but hopefully it's going to go well. I can tell you that we did not post this as a hybrid meeting, but we are live streaming to the Village's YouTube channel right now. We're also recording at the same time. And we may have some participation virtually today from a presenter. So we'll see if that person comes on. So that's the most important item relating to public comments. The room no longer accommodates comments from where you're sitting. So all comments need to be to the podium unless there's an accessibility issue, when we can then use a remote microphone. Same thing at the podium. The same device is there with a button. It's automatically on red. The speaker should push the button to switch to green and then back to red when done speaking. Okay.
Roll call, please.
Chris Zellner,
Here.
Gary Hertzberg,
Here.
Joe Zitzelberger,
Here.
Brian Wallace,
Here.
Chris Thomas, Brian Malish, Kevin Phelps.
Here. Okay, first item we have is minutes. Look for approval.
Make a motion to approve the minutes. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any comments? Call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Next, we have public comment. Is there anyone here who'd like to address the commission on any item on or off the agenda this evening? So please state your name and address and then your comments.
My name is Maria Pat. I live at 1000 Wexford Drive here in Waunakee. I've been very interested in seeing agendas over the last couple of weeks or last couple of times of meetings regarding requests for annexation from Westport to Waunakee. And I know that there are some items on the agenda for today. I also seem to recall a while back, perhaps a couple of years before the pandemic and so on, that Waunakee and Westport were working very closely together to try to create buffers between their communities and the larger communities that surround all of us. And I'm, I guess, a little concerned that Westport is being kind of taken apart. And I would just ask people to keep in mind that Waunakee and Westport have been partners for a long time and would maybe like to be for the next few years, however long it takes. Concern is also that the land that is being asked to be annexed seems to be going to developers that already have tons of land. So that's that comment. And if you read today's Cap Times, you read a long article about workforce housing. And a quote from that article says, the baby boomers are going to retire, but they're going to remain in their homes for 10, 15, 20 years. They're effectively taking housing units out of what I would consider the workforce housing stock. I don't know about you, if you've lived here in town a while, but I bought my house, I paid for it, and I'm going to live into it till they have to carry me out of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? Tracy, do we have any papers turned in? Okay, then we'll move on to our first business item. First item is discuss and take action on site plan for Heritage Elementary School, Woodland Drive. Tim?
Thank you, Chair Zellner. Yeah, bear with me on, this is my first time on this technology, so there might be a slight delay, but this first item, the site plan for Heritage Elementary is found on pages 5 through 32 of the packet. And so Waunakee School District is seeking approval of a site plan to construct a new K through 4 elementary school located on the east side of the Waunakee Intermediate School at 6273 Woodland Drive. The new 2-story building would provide, or would include 30 general education classrooms in addition to some group assembly spaces. On the screen, here we go. Shown in yellow is the location of the new, what will be the new elementary school. You can kind of see, and I don't know if my cursor will work. Yeah. In white, this is the location of the intermediate school relative to the site. Next, let's see, slide shows some of the circulation shown in red. So there will be, the school will be accessed via the south side of Woodland Drive, 2 new parking fields on the west side of the site. Those are shown right there. In addition, a dedicated looping bus lane for pickup and drop off will be on the north side of the school, and that is shown by my cursor right on this portion right here. So with us, and I'm putting it on the spot a little bit, is our planner, Jason Valerius from MSA. And that's just my really brief overview of the site. But Jason, I don't know if you had anything else to add at this point, but staff is recommending approval. Just may point out that the Plan Commission is the final body that will take action on this. This won't be going to the village board. But several comments are included by outside consultants for the village, and those are included in the packet. The applicant has indicated they are aware of those and are okay with those, and will continue to work with the village staff to address those outstanding items. So with that, Jason, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add. I have the site plan available if needed.
Sure. Jason,
Yes.
Microphone green button, or switch it to green.
Thank you. All of us learning the new habits. Briefly, really nice building in terms of the architecture. I think a lot of positive feedback within the staff team, and we have a lot of good things to say about that. Some minor things that require some revision. In the parking, the new parking added for the new school, there are more sites than the village requires, either per the current ordinance or per the proposed amended ordinance, which requires more. This still meets and exceeds that by some, which is good in part because there need to be a few more tree islands in the parking area than is currently shown. All that pretty easily resolvable. The one thing that I hit in my memo a couple of times is just talking about the proximity of the building and the circulation on the site to the neighbor to the east. And while there isn't anything that is strictly not in compliance in terms of dimensional standards, there is some concern about the lack of buffering there, and a suggestion in our report to look for ways to add some landscaping buffering along that eastern property edge. That's all I've got for now.
Okay, as mentioned, the members of the applicant's team is here, or are here, I should say, and available for questions. But staff is recommending approval pursuant to final issues being addressed to the satisfaction of village engineer and community development director.
Okay, plan commissioners, any questions?
Tim, sorry, did we get your comments? I didn't see them in the packet. Did I miss that or? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, sure. So I'm not sure if you got them or not, but I hit most of, I hit the main points of my memo in what I already stated. And I'm just gonna take a quick look at the memo to see if anything else jumps out as being worth note. Again, most of it was with regard to sort of the relationship with the neighboring use. I guess to explain a little bit more, if that neighboring use were zoned residential, and it's not, it's zoned A1. If it were zoned residential, there would need to be, I think, a little bit more setback than there is. I noted that there's a height differential in the ground level, or at least the proposed ground floor elevation of the school as compared to the home, which helps to mitigate a bit the relationship between the two. But this new building is a fairly large building, and so it is still, I think, taller than the adjoining house. The house itself is set back about 160 feet from the property line, so its impact on the home is mitigated a bit by that. So I can talk about more if you'd like, but that's, I think, some other points that are, if you had to fill in the gaps there.
Any other questions?
Was there any discussion on, because I know when the intermediate school went in, right, there was some improvements to Woodland Drive with the additional, what I would say probably double the traffic, if I had to guess on what the enrollments are gonna be. Are there improvements that are gonna have to happen on Woodland Drive, and where's the responsibility lie for those?
Yeah, there are some improvements needed to Woodland, including crosswalks. I think there's an RFB or a flashing beacon associated with that. The taper and flare of the entrance lane for the bus, I think, needed to be addressed. But some of those comments are provided in by our consulting engineer, Strand. And I happened to notice, and I apologize, those actually were not included in the packet. So I apologize for that.
But is that gonna be part of the construction from the school's
Yes.
perspective? Any of those improvements, and the staff is gonna work out what those improvements need to be to
Correct.
warrant the additional traffic and.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so a traffic impact analysis was conducted as part of the submittal and reviewed by our engineering team. So yeah, all those will be worked out with pursuant to our village engineer's approval.
Gary?
Yeah, I just reiterate what Brian said. It's busy when they drop them off and early, but days when there's concerts at an elementary school, you see it at Arboretum today, cars are parked up on this everywhere. And so parking and entrance, and especially into an elementary school, I think is really important. And I'd really want to make sure that we address Woodland Drive for people, coming and going on a busy, event day at the school. And if we have to overbuild, I'd rather overbuild than,
Joe, any comments?
Nothing additional.
Kevin?
Nope, nothing else.
Brian, do you have another one?
I guess maybe to the engineering notes or to the traffic impact analysis. I'm sorry. I'm curious, back when we built the intermediate school, traffic impact analysis done, thumbs up, sniff test. Now we've lived it for a few years, and I've had the pleasure of dropping my kids off well north of the site and having them walk. I think we've all probably heard about the backups on Woodland. I'm curious now, this traffic analysis, does it kind of take into account the reality of what's come to fruition from the previous, as it sort of blends the two on site?
Short answer, yes, it does.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then I have maybe one more question. I'm sorry if I missed it when I was late. I'm kind of curious about what exactly the entrance exit traffic flow is. If all the elementary school is supposed to enter from the furthest east, or do they share the entrance? That
Sure.
so there could be a little bit of.
Yep, I'm gonna actually turn that over to the applicant, and they're gonna walk through that.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right, green light. I'm Chris Michaud. I'm with EUA, architecture firm working with the district on this project. I don't have a pointer. And I have to stay by the microphone, but I'll try to talk through, it. This might answer a couple questions too. Intermediate school and the elementary school will be running on two different bell schedules. So, and I think they're an hour apart. So the peak traffics don't occur at the site at the same time. There'll be one and then it leaves and another one comes in. So that was intentional on the district to mitigate potential traffic problems that could have occurred here if it were a middle school and they occurred at the same time. So two different bell schedules, two different peak traffic times on the site. What we anticipate, and you'll see in the main entrance to the site will remain the same for both schools. So whether you're picking your child up from the intermediate school or the elementary school, you'd use that, yep, right there, and you'd come down. So if you're going to the intermediate school, you go through the same fashion. The traffic study did indicate a couple things that could be done to get more queue onto the property. The district is evaluating whether or not they try to do some of those on site. They didn't want to do it mid-school year or in the middle to try to introduce a new traffic pattern, is when I was talking to the principal at the intermediate school. If you're in someone accessing the elementary school, after you enter the site, you come down to the T intersection, and then you'd head east over to where that red line is. At that point, what we're doing is what we want to do is try to get as many cars onto the site. So we're going to cycle down. So we'll go south and then loop up. And that whole drive there is a pickup drop off zone for students at the elementary school. So by bringing the traffic that far into the site, we're essentially trying to pull it as much off the public area with them as possible. And then once cars get up after they picked up their child, they exit the site. Buses have a completely separate entrance route, which is independent of that. Has to be independent because you can't have buses in the car lines waiting to pick up students. So they come in, they do a loop at the front of the building, and they exit back out the same entrance. The main entrance to the building, if you could just point that out right there, that's the main entrance for parents that would come there or visitors that would come to the school. For people that are dropping their children off for early childhood, it would be down further. Keep going down a little further. That zone there where the road is, that's a playground there, but the road, the drop-off condition there is where parents will drop off for students that are in the EC, early childhood program. Any deliveries or receiving and deliveries access the building on the backside, and that's intentional to keep that traffic away from any spaces on the site where there's going to be kids outside playing. So we keep that on the backside. Brian, were there any other questions you had on the site circulation?
No, that's kind of where I was landing. I think I'm a little more pessimistic about the timing of the two drop-offs of the two schools, and largely someone that gets to drop off at multiple schools in the morning. It kind of brought the second maybe question up. Have you thought about on-site queuing for that family that has an elementary school and an intermediate school age kid, and probably is not going to then drive home and then come back?
Yeah,
10
well,
minutes later?
one option is to drive them home and come back. The other option would be to utilize visitor parking or something and park in that area. If you do, for instance, pick up at one school and then now you're an hour early for the next school, you can get in the queue line and pull all the way up and wait in that line or wait in the area. That's typically how it's handled at schools. Yeah.
Maybe the last one, I'm just kind of curious, anything from like the forest that we could kind of analyze, utilize here? I know they've got over at Harvest kind of a shared intermediate middle school site. Anything gone well over there, gone poorly over there that maybe we can?
I'm not too familiar with how things are operating there. I do know that they did have some traffic. I don't know what their school's schedules are. I think they coincide differently than these. So.
I've heard from a lot of people, you know, about the queuing on Woodland. They get beat up about it quite a bit. So yeah, I am a little bit sensitive to that. So I wouldn't mind checking out that traffic when if we can get a copy of that. It's a difficult site. I appreciate the effort to get that loop, you know, as far south as we can to kind of encourage people to get off of Woodland and onto the district's property. So maybe short of a fingers crossed that, yeah, hopefully it does it. I don't think I've got any other particular questions. So, all right, thanks, Chris.
Go ahead, Kevin.
I'm kind of curious, how does this site plan compare to the other elementary schools? I guess I'm wondering how much playground space is there compared to Prairie or Arboretum? Does anybody know the answer to that? I mean, is it similar? Because it feels tighter and smaller, but maybe it's not.
Closest to the microphone. When we did the outdoor play areas here, we were taking square foot analysis off of the existing Heritage Elementary School to make sure that we either hit or exceeded those playground area there. And we are hitting that here. So we didn't look at Arboretum or the other schools. So. Oh yeah, the green space in the back, as you can see just below the cursor there, is smaller because it doesn't have the whole current 300-meter track that you currently have behind the existing Heritage right now.
Okay, so I'm going to go away from what you guys were discussing. So I'm going to go away from what you guys were discussing and ask about water. If there's anybody that can talk about water, I know we had a problem with the bioretention pond in the original school. Is there anything additional being added, or do we anticipate runoff being different because we have more parking lot on there?
They're asking about water runoff now versus previously. So I'm going to try and explain it a little bit here, but yeah, she's out of state, unfortunately, today. So, I mean, oh, go ahead, Roxanne.
So we're meeting that 100% infiltration of the 100-year storm that the town of Westport requires. So there should be no increase in peak flow or peak volume up to the 100-year storm.
Okay.
Hear that okay?
Yep. Thank you. Any other questions? So Brian, our options are to approve or not approve. Is that what I'm getting?
Well, so I guess you have a couple of different options in addition to those. There's obviously been some discussion about certain issues, traffic being one of them. The recommended motion, I think, does incorporate the comments that Strand made regarding traffic. I know that you don't have them in front of you, but there were a number of them. So theoretically, if you're comfortable with that, you could approve knowing that traffic is part of the recommended motion. I think the other, you certainly could deny, but I think the better option maybe for that would be to table it to the extent that you want. And then maybe if it is something that you want to table because you want more information from staff and the applicant, I would, in this case, I probably would do a motion to table and then maybe give staff and the applicant some guidance on where you're looking to have more information, and to the extent that you have any particular concerns with the site plan that you see in front of them, identify what those concerns are so that the applicant and staff could work on those. So those are two of the options moving forward. I suppose a third option would be to still approve tonight based on the recommended motion, but add conditions to the approval to provide more guidance to staff on the types of things that you're going to want to see make sure that they're hammered out. All that being said, if essentially the pause that you have tonight is because you're looking for more information and a little bit more clarity on some of the concerns that you raised, I think the tabling would be the most appropriate route and provide some guidance on what you want to see, and then it could be brought back to you in February.
Kevin?
I like the idea of tabling, but are we under the gun at all from a timing standpoint? Is there anything that we need approval today to get moving on, or are we okay?
We do have scheduling, I'm Robin Savola with F. Ewing Architects. We do have scheduling concerns if we delay. So I do understand that if there's information that wasn't provided to you guys, that might be a thing, but if it is something that was provided and reviewed, I would hope that maybe we could do something before February.
So this was in the part that we didn't receive, I'm assuming, is what you're saying, Tim?
Correct.
So with that, did Strand look at different options, or was this really the only thing that was considered?
Different options for which,
The configurations potentially.
no, the reaction was to what was presented.
So in your discussions, when you were dealing with the traffic then, was there any other options other than what's been proposed for how you could lay it out?
We had initially we had looked at some slight variations, but we were trying to get that loop of the drop off as long as possible for the elementary school. I would mention that one of the things that's in the Strand memo that the district was looking at is for the intermediate school of extending that drop off down to the back parking lot and then sort of looping it around there and back up, giving you some additional queue space. So that is what I think Chris was mentioning before, was some of the recommendations from Strand that can be implemented.
When you were having your discussions, did you have any, as you were going through and coming up with this solution, what was any drawbacks that you guys pointed out, or would you feel would have been something, oh, I'd like to change this, or is there nothing? This is perfect.
I mean, I think this is the best configuration for the site that, is there. We have the, the space allowed to do it with the exception of potentially doing the entire thing as a, weaving loop, but we do need to preserve enough space for the green space for the recess. So I think this was what we thought was one of the better, the best solution. And then if the traffic impact analysis had come back with any discrepancies, they would have made some recommendations to us to make adjustments, but they didn't. They felt that this would meet the demand.
Chris, can I
Go ahead, Brian.
interject one thing? The other option that we have right now is we can print out those recommendations and take a 15-minute break if you guys want to take a look at it. It may be that you look at the comments regarding traffic in the Strand memo, and I'm not sure if Jason commented on traffic, but in both of the memos, and to the extent that you're comfortable with the information that's in there, that may make you more comfortable with the recommended motion. Alternatively, you may look at it and say, hey, there's things that really just aren't answering my questions in the Strand memo, in which case then I think, notwithstanding the fact that it may create some scheduling issues, if the information is not in there and it doesn't alleviate your concerns, that's where you would need to table it to be able to get those answered.
So that said, if we take 15 minutes, can we just keep going with the next item on the agenda while they're being done and then come back to this?
Sure. I think they're in fact being printed as we're sitting here right now.
Okay, so if we don't have any other, do you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think, they've done everything on the site plan. I think that addresses my concerns with the queuing on the site plan. I just want to have a better understanding of the road cross section and, are there lanes that, when they're pulling in so cars can continue to flow, and where are the crosswalks and how's the bike path intersect? And to me, the motion, says it needs to meet the satisfaction of the village engineer. So I think we can, if we share some concerns, and that's my biggest concern, is really understanding that road section. So we don't have cars queuing out on Woodland. And if they do queue there, that we have enough lanes and space to address it. And the village engineer can deal with that. I'd rather move forward because I think the site plan, they've done everything that seems to be reasonably, that fits on there. So that's my only thought.
That wasn't 15 minutes.
I have a question on the intermediate school, that back loop. Isn't that a bus loop?
That right there is a bus loop. Sorry, that right there, yes, that is a bus loop. The discussion, the options we were discussing with TADI was that where they turn now to go into the front of the school. I'm just gonna walk over and point to this. So they go down towards the back playground area and then cone off a turning radius so that cars can turn and then go back up.
You're talking about the cars for the intermediate school, but the buses will be in back.
Yes,
Yes.
Yes.
And so I understand and be upfront. I mean, what the traffic pattern is inside the site, I guess I kind of defer to that to the school district to have to deal with complaints or queuing or whatever that might be. My more concern is about on Woodland Drive, but to that point, it was talked about obviously different times, but those can change over the course of time too, as far as, hey, we're running an hour different schedule, but at some point in time in the future, it may be the same time or a half an hour apart. I mean, that's going to be a question the school's going to have to answer at some point in time. But if you talk about not having cars in a bus line queue, we're putting cars in a bus line queue, even though right now they may run on a different schedule.
so they do use the same road, but it is an hour apart in between the bus arrival times. And those are pretty strict about when they arrive and leave. While some parents, I suppose, might come more than an hour early. There is, I mean, I don't imagine the district would align their building schedules to cause conflicts on their site.
Thank you. Gary, though, as far as motion, I think as long as the staff can take care of the concerns on Woodland Drive, I'd be in favor of moving forward.
So is that a motion from one of you?
Chris, before you do, just to make sure that we have this completely covered, let me just make a suggestion here. Recommended motion is motion to approve the Heritage Elementary School site plan subject to all outstanding issues being addressed to the satisfaction of the village engineer and the community development director, including but not limited to queuing on Woodland Drive and the impact of on-site traffic on Woodland Drive. Just want to make sure that we have those two issues covered, if that accurately reflects the concerns.
And I think I'm not sure how the pedestrian path out there, how that would interface with any of it. But I'm sure that's just a crosswalk issue or whatever. So that's just my concern.
I think we can add the pedestrian
Just
path
pedestrian
issue
traffic, yeah.
as part of that additional conditions.
So you're making that modification to the recommended motion?
Correct.
Is what you're saying?
So if you're inclined to move forward tonight based on the recommended motion, I would add the language that I identified, if you're okay with it. In addition to that, including ensuring adequate safety issues associated with the pedestrian path.
So why don't you read that one more time, Brian, what you're saying,
Okay.
and then we can see if somebody's gonna make that motion.
Before you do, though, I have one other thing. Not necessarily has to be in a motion, but I did see that is language in here, and it was discussed earlier about the adjoining property and how to make, Jason brought it up about how to make some sort of buffer along there. I think that is part of the questions here. So as long as those are adequately addressed per the motion.
I think that as long as it's explicit within one of the memos, then yes, it is a component of the expectation that's gonna have to get worked out with staff on that.
Yeah, if I could comment on that, I just want to point out that there isn't much space to work with over there. And so while I raised the topic and asked for effort toward it, there's not a whole lot that can be done short of moving the building, and there isn't much, it's a pretty well packed site at this point. So I
Isn't
think
there an existing tree line that runs there already? And does that split both properties, or is it on just the school site?
There
And it's
is-
really about what's going to get removed as you go forward.
there is an existing tree line. There will be, some of it will be removed. So that was part of the comments were to plant some conifers up there, and we can agree to do that along the sort of, it was specifically identified along the gym, the east wall of the gym, and then sort of that receiving area.
And I'm hopeful you've had conversations with the property owner there about that.
Not specifically about that and the tree replanting, that did just come up. And when we
Okay.
got the comments, I believe it was.
But as far as the
Monday,
property
Thursday.
owner and the school in there and having some sort of agreement on what that might look like when it's all finished.
I think we can certainly talk to them about what that is.
Thank you.
So motion to approve the Heritage Elementary School site plan subject to all outstanding issues being addressed to the satisfaction of the village engineer and community development director, including but not limited to queuing on Woodland Drive, the impact of on-site traffic on Woodland Drive, and addressing public safety issues associated with the pedestrian path.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other comments or questions? Okay, I'm going to call it to question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Abstain.
So we have one abstain.
Yeah.
Okay. Motion carries. Okay. Next we have, thank you, everyone. Discussion, recommendation on request by Dalmatian Farms LLC to annex 40 acres adjacent to the Waunakee Intermediate School on Woodland Drive. Tim?
Thank you, Chair. This is a request to annex 40 acres of land from the town of Westport into the village. And we just looked at the school site, which is located immediately north of this the subject 40-acre parcel. The request is fairly straightforward, is just simply a 40-acre parcel from the town of Westport into the village. The lands are contiguous and are consistent with the village's comprehensive plan for this area designated as community residential use. Staff has already met with the applicant along with the members of the Regional Plan Commission staff to begin the process for an amendment of the urban service area to include these lands. But at this point, the action is simply for the annexation of the 40 acres. At that point, if approved by the village board, the lands will be placed in the A1 Ag Holding Zoning District. So staff is recommending approval. Available for questions.
Questions, commission members? Brian Wallace?
So based on the comp plan and the fact that that is already identified area for residential, community residential growth, is it fair to say that that comp plan is also in approval with the town of Westport on those lands?
Yes, that's correct.
And that's good. That's all I got. Yes.
Brian Malich?
No, I don't think I have any, well, I do have one. Way back, we were looking at, I think we even had maybe a layout for neighborhood going back there. Did it extend onto this 40 at that time as well, or is this more? Okay, so this is a little bit addition. Okay. No, good, thanks.
All right, staying in fashion. Brian Kleinmeyer, did you have a comment?
I just wanted to add, also to try to provide some information in regard to the public comment that was made earlier today on annexation. This land and the next item that we have coming up on the agenda, all of this property falls within the long-term growth area of the village. And, so theoretically, we could have annexed this land as in the late 90s because the boundary agreement was adopted in 1996. And there certainly is language in the boundary agreement says the long-term growth area is that area in which it is mutually agreed that the village has a reasonable present or demonstrable future need for the property if annexed. And it goes on to talk about how the fact that essentially the town agrees that it's okay for this land to come into the village. Also, as I understand the boundary agreement, the reason for establishing the long-term growth area was in an effort then to basically say, okay, you're not going to grow past that because we want to make sure that we have this buffer area. So theoretically, even if the village grew into all of the area that is the long-term growth area within the boundary agreement, the buffer between the town and the village would still remain in existence.
So is the, I guess I'll call it a dashed line there that comes up and around. It's called the community separation zone. Is that the agreed upon boundary?
Yeah,
That was
that is raising my
established
hand.
in
Yeah, that is the area, correct. So this blue, hit my cursor up here, this blue dashed line. This is on the village's kind of southwest side. That's the community separation zone. That's what Brian is referring to.
Okay, so we had Brian, and Brian. We're gonna go to Joe.
I'm interested, there's a development limitation area there. I assume that is maybe particularly wet areas, or what? Is there a reason that can't be built on?
If I may, some of those, there's some wetlands within that 40. There's also some slopes in there. I think that doesn't necessarily say that's no buildable, but that's just a call out for some potential development limitations, such as steep slopes or wetlands or environmental factors, things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Gary?
The one thing I like about adding this to the existing Kilkenny West, as we just talked about the school property, and instead of that neighborhood, and maybe the kids wouldn't walk from their homes to school, but to incorporate some type of drop-off area at the back side of the school property where people, instead of having to go, out on Q and then bring all their kids in on 19 and drop them off at the school, if we could access school from the backside through this property and design it that way, I think it'd be a big advantage.
So that you may notice, I know we're referring a little bit to the previous item, but the site plan did include a potential pathway through the site to link to this neighborhood as one possibility. Also, as noted in one of the staff reports, there is, and actually by the previous applicant, there is a placeholder for an easement along the west side of the school site that could provide a future point of connectivity to the lands to the south.
I would gather that this could potentially be similar to what was done in Arboretum with the backside entrance from the development.
I think Prairie has one too, in 6 Mile, so. Good point, Gary. Kevin?
Nope, I think it makes a lot of sense.
I would make a motion to recommend approval of the Dalmatian Farm LLC request to annex 40 acres located south of and adjacent to the intermediate school located on Woodland Drive from the town of Westport to the village of Waunakee, with the land being placed in A-1 agricultural holdings zoning district.
I would second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and apparently you don't want my comments. So it's all good. I'll save my comments actually for the next annexation. So I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. All right, third item is discussion recommendation on request to annex 324 acres lying on the north and south sides of State Highway 19 west to County Road I, owned by the Kaltenberg Farm Partnership LLP and Viola G. Kaltenberg Revocable Trust from the town of Westport to the village of Waunakee. Tim?
Thank you, Chair. The applicant are requesting the annexation of these lands as you described and as shown on the screen in yellow. The lands are contiguous to the village, and as Brian previously pointed out, these lands are within the framework of that 1996 intergovernmental agreement. This is identified as the future growth area for the village. So really what was contemplated in 1996 is now coming to fruition today with this request. And similar to the last annexation request at this time, if approved by the village, these lands would go into the A1 holding zoning district until a future comp plan amendment and a future rezoning request. But for now, this is just the annexation request from the town into the village. And because this is consistent with our 1996 IGA staff is recommending approval. A representative of the applicant is here and available to answer questions, as are we.
Okay, I guess I will go first since I didn't go the last time. So we've been meeting I've had several meetings with the Kaltenberg family, town of Westport. We've all been in discussions with regards to this property and what the needs and uses could be for the property, which we'll still have to determine 100% after this. But the big thing for it is our industrial park area right across from it, both on Hogan Road and State Highway 19113, are where it makes sense for us to expand potentially with our industrial business park. And then potentially have some residential housing on there as well. And the Kaltenbergs have indicated that's something that they may be interested in doing up top. On the, I don't know if we can, why don't we have a red pointer? We just spent all kinds of money. We should have a red pointer for us to
All I can say is we're working on it.
point up there.
Next meeting.
Tim, can you use your pointer to identify the area,
Yeah.
Chris?
Where we're talking about where they would be interested in the potential residential. Otherwise, right now, the site is well suited for growth on the industrial side. If you're not familiar, Intercon is right there. That's the building that's in there. And one great thing about Intercon in Westport, and when we put Intercon there, you really don't notice all the truck traffic and everything that's going in there. They do a really nice job of getting cars in and out with that exit point on County Road I to the, well, can you show them where County I is over there, where the road's going out? Yeah. So from getting in and traffic out from it, from a business park standpoint or industrial, light industrial, out to the interstate, getting great access, that's an important thing. And that's a really good spot for that. And so for our future growth, that made sense. And with the addition of the properties out in front of Carla Stotts and Sons coming in, annexing into the village as well, it just makes sense for us with that, in my opinion. So those are my comments on this. We didn't go to the Kaltenbergs to say, hey, we want you to annex into our village. The Kaltenbergs want to annex into the village at this time, which they have every right to do. And, you know, we're listening to that and the different options that it provides for us out into the future. So those are my comments. Brian?
Well, I really have anything to follow that up with. We've kind of looked at this parcel for a while and kind of have a general idea of the direction it's going. It feels appropriate, so I'm good.
Kevin?
And Westport said what? You talked to them?
So Westport was in all the same meetings with us as we were discussing this with the Kaltenberg family. So of course, they would love for it to stay a little bit more rural with some farmland out there. But that would be up to the Kaltenbergs. I think the Kaltenbergs have taken that they would like to develop the property and this gives them that ability to do it. And I think that's the big reason, I think. And I don't want to speak for them, but that's kind of how the conversation was. And everybody was included in that conversation, including the folks from Westport.
I know in every, conversation I had on joint plan with Westport was they really wanted to have a natural buffer. When you were on 19, look in that direction, that you wouldn't see stuff. You'd see trees and make it look a lot more natural than it could if you start putting buildings on it. So, I kind of agree with them. That's kind of nice up there. It doesn't look like the city. It looks different. So I figured they would say that.
Okay. Gary?
No, I think I think the Kaltenbergs want to come into Waunakee. I think this makes sense. It does from I think a business park standpoint. I think we can address some of the concerns that Westport may have because it is a nice area. I think Intercon's done a great job. And you got Schumacher there and Schumacher's entrance is going to change in the next few years. So I think we just have to make sure that we kind of respect the wishes of Westport during that development. But I think it's a natural fit for what we want to do in our business park.
Joe?
I think the only thoughts that I really have on it would be more appropriate when we get to more of a development. So that's all.
Okay, Brian?
I'm in favor. I think it makes sense with where we should be growing to, so especially from the commercial or industrial area. So, and you know, with the new roundabout in 19 and 113 and the construction and then to get east to the interstate, I think makes sense. It's a viable location in the future.
Okay. So
Chris, just two quick things if I could. One is Diane Kaltenberg Ehlers is on as an attendee. Diane is a representative of the family, and I believe their attorney is in the audience representing them as well. So she's here in case any questions come up, and I can bring her in to speak if needed. I would also add, just from a planning perspective, and Tim can show it on the map, but that community separation zone also shows up on this map in the southeast quadrant there where you're at right now, Tim. That area is where the community separation zone begins in our comprehensive plan with the town of Westport. So this does not infringe into that separation area. And just so Diane knows, I know she's listening, but Diane, if you do care to share any comments, if you'd raise your hand, use the raise your hand feature, and I'll be able to see that on my screen.
So I would just tack on with Kevin's comment about Westport and making sure we're good with Westport. Everything within this, we talked about and discussed, and I think our relationship with Westport, somebody brought up our relationship with Westport in public comment. I think our relationship is very strong still and will continue to be that. I don't see this as something that's going to affect or change that, especially if, you know, as we go through this board and this body continues to work with them and talk through the issues, which we did in a very open way in regards to this property. I'd give you, if you have anything you'd like to add. Nope. Okay. Our attorney's not quiet. Sorry, Brian. That did, any other comments? No, I can't tell if they put hand up or not. Is that something we'll be able to see in the future? Like if somebody does put their hand up, that I'd see that, or no? I'm sorry. We're learning, everybody, with the new technology here.
Yeah, you've probably seen us back here going back and forth. We're taking notes. I'm texting to a staff person in the back of the house who's actually pretending like they're an attendee. So we're working through all the bugs. Thanks for letting us do that. But Chris, we can work through that, find out a good way to, but her hand is not up currently.
Okay, well, I'm going to make the motion to recommend approval of the request by Kaltenberg Family Partnership LLP and Viola G. Kaltenberg Revocable Trust to annex 324.4 acres lying on the north and south sides of State Highway 19 west of County Road I from the town of Westport to the village of Waunakee, with the land being placed in the A1 Agricultural Holding Zoning District. Second by Joe Zitzelberger. Any other comments? Call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, next we have discuss and take action on conversion of a portion of Kuko's Restaurant located at 246 North Century Avenue into a grocery store. Tim.
Thank you, Chair. This is a fairly straightforward request. It really requires a site plan approval for the change in use. Kuko's is looking to expand their footprint in the interior, as shown on the screen. The area in blue would be converted to a grocery store. It's about 1,460 or 1,459 square feet of the space. So it's really that simple. That use is permitted in the C1D zoning district, but that change does trigger a review by the Plan Commission. There would be no change in parking demand due to that change in use. The parking standards are essentially similar based on the square footage. So it's already located in a multi-tenant commercial area. And it's a fairly straightforward request. Staff is recommending approval of the site plan.
I'll start with Gary this time. Any questions or comments?
No, I think it's a good use of space for him.
Kevin?
I guess I was just curious, does it change trucking needs at all? I mean, is there bigger trucks coming in and out than a restaurant? I don't know the difference, but that would be my only fear.
I don't know that specific answer. I imagine that the access for trucks will be the same. The restaurant is I don't know, the applicant is there. Oh, applicant's here.
Just a moment, excuse me.
Can you go up to the podium, please?
And then just make sure the green button, make sure that, yeah, it's all right. I think it's on already.
Yeah, the trucks are gonna be the same provider or
Whoops, sir, just a moment.
restaurant.
Your voice won't be picked up if you step away from the microphone. So if you can
Okay,
state the microphone, and then Tim can work the cursor and try to show for everyone
yeah,
what you're
so
pointing
the
at.
trucks are be the same for provider or products from the restaurants. So it's gonna be just a bigger orders for provide to the store. So in the beginning, we built the wall, so we apply for the remodel it and I get a permit to build a wall to divide the 44,800 square foot for a grocery future. So, and then the wall has like 2 doors to connect the restaurant with the grocery store. So, and then, yeah, but I think anything is gonna be the same. Providers is not like more traffic at the back on the front. So, but if you see, we got like 3 door entry from our parking lot. So I don't know if it's gonna be used just 1 door or 2 doors, or if it's like a restriction for like closing the grocery store for like, alcohol or whatever. So we can close the 2 doors, we connect the grocery store and the bar at like some specific hours. So you may have, for like restriction like the other places does, they close like 9, so nobody can go into the grocery store.
Sounds good. Brian?
He was able to answer my questions. I was curious about a divider there with how that was gonna look. So it's gonna be 2 separate entrances, 2 separate units in essence, right? That's what I gathered from it, so.
Okay, Brian?
No, I don't have any questions. Straightforward. Be a
Cool.
nice amenity.
Joe?
Any additional details about amending the liquor license
That will have to go before our clerk.
and the reasoning behind that?
The premises, the change in premises. Yep.
Okay.
Out of curiosity, that's a good question. So there's a liquor license for the restaurant. I'm assuming the store will not supply, or would they have to have a separate one? for that potential?
Separate. I don't recall the difference between class A, class B, but there will be, my understanding is that the grocery store will be selling alcohol. So they'll need a liquor license for that.
And they come to whom? for
To our
that?
clerk,
What's that?
village clerk.
Okay.
Okay, I'm fully supportive. I'm gonna make the motion again.
Motion to approve the site plan as submitted by Kuko's Restaurant to allow the conversion of a portion of their interior space at 246 North Century Avenue to a grocery store.
I will second. I have the second. As the chair, I'm gonna take that second. So, all right, any other comments? Call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, so that's it for business items. Thank you, everybody, for attending. I can't believe anybody would not want to stay for our referral item, which is discussing regarding possible ordinance amendment to allow keeping of chickens. So I actually am the referral in this and the requester. I've had numerous people come up to me requesting that we allow chickens to be in the village. They're in town, they're in the city. There are many places, and I just was pretty clear that I wasn't going to allow the roosters into the town from a noise perspective, and limit the amounts of chickens potentially housed. And so I went to Brian, and he, if you look, he's got a few less hair. But I just wanted to have a discussion to see where the committee was, or the commission was, in regards to this topic. I wasn't really all that excited about it in the past, but the amount of people that have asked, people want to do it, and it's not a nuisance to the community in any way. And I mean, that's one way that they can provide food for themselves. So I was just looking to get people's thoughts and things. And Tim, I don't know if you want to add anything right now, but you've already looked into our surrounding communities and what language could look like and all those kinds of things. So maybe you want to share that with everybody.
Sure. So other communities have ordinances in their municipal codes that allow keeping of chickens, but under certain provisions. For example, frequently there are provisions of no roosters, only a certain number of chickens. They have to be enclosed in a certain area, et cetera. So it really depends on how the ordinance is written. But I think this is really just a first step in giving us as staff the go ahead to start putting together those parameters to present to you for consideration.
And Brian, maybe you want to share all your experience with other communities and forming those ordinances and such.
It is true that some other communities have started allowing chickens. Typically in the past, cities and villages did not. I think probably under similar circumstances where you had a number of residents who had requested it. It creates additional work for staff. You will have complaints from neighbors. Not that the chickens shouldn't be there because they would have been approved. It's that they're not taking the person who is housing the chickens is not taking the appropriate steps under the code to make sure that the smells aren't that bad. I mean, you need to clean the coops. You need to maintain the coops to make sure that the chickens don't get out of their yard. So it is true that other communities are doing this. And so Waunakee would be in line with that. I would just say it is going to create some issues for staff from an enforcement and administrative standpoint.
Okay, and do we know how many of our subdivisions have covenants that prevent or still will not allow chickens in them?
Not specifically. There are some though that do have covenants that speak to disallowing that use.
And those would be able to stop anything we would do. Is that correct?
Right.
Or-
Those covenants would supersede our ordinance.
Okay. So I'm just looking for your feedback to see if this is something that we want to venture down the road of to consider, since we've had quite a few people requesting it, including coming to the board in the past too, and commissions to recommend or request it.
So I missed that. We have covenants now that don't allow it.
So
It's
there's nothing in our ordinance that allows it other than, I believe it in the A1, the A1 zoning district, they're referred to as like poultry, livestock, things like that. But in all the other zoning districts, it's not an allowed use. It's not a permitted or a conditional use.
Okay, I think I'm clear on that. But are there subdivisions that have it prohibited in their covenants?
Yes, but I don't know all of them offhand. I haven't looked at all of them, but I
Because
know
if
that there are
all of
some.
them do, there's no sense in talking about it, right?
Well, that's not all homes within the village are subject to covenants. So, and so each neighborhood, and even within your different neighborhoods, you theoretically are going to have different covenants. Some may prohibit it, some may not. So the zoning code would affect, to the extent that the planning commission and the village board, well, to the extent that the village board approves an ordinance allowing for chickens in limited fashion, those would be permitted in whatever zoning districts are identified in the ordinance. But as Tim said, if you live in a particular subdivision that has covenants that prohibit them, those people who live in that subdivision would not be allowed to have them.
Yeah, some of those might be that you can't have fences.
Oh, correct. Yeah, there's
you can't-
multiple. Yeah.
You can't have an additional building, a coop. Those are covenants that are pretty strong in those areas. I know that.
So I want to make one other comment. I equate this to when I was in high school and on the student council, we had no vending machines in the school at all. And we were trying to get juice boxes available. And the principal at the time was Jack Reed, and Jack looks at me and he says, I might go along with this, but here's what the deal is. If I find any juice boxes around the school that aren't where they're supposed to be, this isn't going to be here very long. I think we can probably do something along those lines. Once we put it in.
But if it's a zoning code, so if you approve the zoning ordinance change and then some people bring it in, well, then if you want to take it away, there's going to be certain people who are grandfathered that already have them or that are going to be continued to.
Unless they have violations that I'm assuming are in.
Theoretically, we could look at an issue of, one question is going to be, are you going to have a permit? I know there are certain municipalities that started with an ordinance that said you had to get a permit in order to have chickens. And then they found that people were having chickens and nobody was coming in to get the permits. And so then they just decided to get rid of the permit requirement. The permit requirement, there's a lot of different things that come into play with respect to the enforcement provision. So if that is a concern, we could we'd have to research that issue as to whether or not we'd have the ability to, I don't want to get too much in the weeds here, but essentially somebody potentially could be grandfathered in one way, but if you are requiring a permit on an annual basis and prior violations are going to be considered as to whether or not a new permit is going to be issued, that may be one way that we could address it if we go that far.
So this is what this is about, everybody, is asking the questions to talk about this. To get it out there, because we're gonna need to find out these answers, because this is just something we're considering. That's all we're doing tonight, is looking if we're gonna go forward and talk about it. Good.
I can tell you, I grew up on a farm. We had 400 chickens every year of my life. And people who say chickens don't have an odor, they haven't been around them, number one. Number two, my dear mother, who moved into town from the farm, I was at her house a couple years ago and I heard a rooster crowing. And they said, oh yeah, they passed this ordinance in Columbus and everybody's afraid of this neighbor and they won't go up and say anything to them. And they have dogs on both sides of that person. So when the chicken would crow, both dogs would start barking. My mother's house was like, I was like, how do you live here? So I'm just telling you, there's a lot of issues that come along with this that, I mean, it sounds great, but there's a lot of issues that impact neighbors.
Okay. Kevin.
My school analogy be when my son was in 5th grade, he said everyone had a cell phone. It turned out 2 people had a cell phone. How many people are really asking for this? Is it 2, 10, 100? I mean, what are we talking here?
I've had 8. So, and I know they came before the commission to ask for them in previous. So again, I'm not one that just says no automatically. I'm going to give it an opportunity, and that's what we're doing tonight. Ryan?
I'm fine with maybe vetting it and talking a little bit further about it. I love the idea of having chickens, but we're in a village on some pretty small lots, and I guess it might take a lot of convincing that can be done in I don't know, reasonable fashion without chicken cops and I don't know, everything else we got to bring to the table to deal with this.
I don't want to say chicken cops anywhere in this building, especially because our law enforcement does a wonderful job. But I don't want to have them associated to chicken cops. Okay.
So yeah, I think there's just a lot. I mean, how many?
Did you mean chicken coops? Oh, sorry, Brian.
No, so I think there's a lot of boxes to check off, but I'm not opposed to having the discussion. I think is the gist of where we're at.
Joe?
So a couple of different thoughts here. The first one is right now, I think there's an ordinance that allows up to 3 pets. And I would assume that chickens do not count towards that, or do we start running into some sort of a mess there?
In general, no, because that falls under a type of use or animal. And generally chickens aren't considered household pets. So that would be currently, as I mentioned, I think they're only allowed in the A1 district as poultry.
Okay.
So that's part of how this ordinance would be written and how you define them and tighten up the parameters around allowing them.
Okay. And then there was discussion around the different covenants that we have throughout the village. And I know that there are some that have that. For neighborhoods that do not currently have that, would they have an option to be able to implement that? Or is that specific to the covenants of each one, how they would go about amending that?
Well, one, just so the prohibition on number of pets is specific to cats and dogs.
Okay.
So it is limited to just the number. And then I think within that same section is the section that Tim was talking about regarding prohibition on livestock. That's an interesting question as to whether or not could you form essentially a new homeowners association.
Or an existing one for that matter.
Yeah, well, and to be clear, and I think you understand this. I mean, this isn't a village issue. That's then the people of the homeowners association. If there's let's say there's an existing homeowners association that's been kind of dormant, but there, let's say, was some covenants that were prepared at a certain period of time. I think that those homeowners would have to look at those covenants to see if they could effectively bring those back into effect and then potentially amend them. So I think there is the possibility, but that would be something that those homeowners would have to work on collectively.
Okay, and likewise, if they currently have something that says they can't and they want to change that, that's.
Yeah,
up to
there's an
them to amend
amendment
it however
process
they-
and all of those covenants that would theoretically allow for them to be amended to allow it.
Okay, thank you.
Ryan? Talking.
Yeah, no, I was talking, I guess, the best I could relate this to is a life experience. In my day job, not quite 2 years ago, it was actually close to Easter by all means. One of our neighboring properties had, I don't know what the name was, very expensive goats, had like half a dozen or 10 very expensive goats. She was using our line fence as the containment area and the fence broke. And then they were all over our property. And it was raining, it was Friday, and I had to go down and herd the sheep or the goats back to their property. So I only say that because it relates a little bit to this, where property owners adjacent or in the neighborhood may become chicken herders at some point in time. And I would be a little concerned about that, but I'm willing to listen and see what happens.
I was gonna say I think there's been some cat herders too, in the neighborhoods, at least in mine. Go ahead.
An additional question sort of stemming from that. If at some point we're looking at an ordinance for this, it would probably come into if there's a licensing piece. Do we have the option of saying, yes, you can do this as long as there is agreement from neighbors?
That'd be pretty granular.
Yeah.
We could look into that. I'm not aware of that. That gives me a little bit of pause because this is going to be in the zoning code, I would think. And that's typically not something, obviously we have language in our existing code that certain circumstances notice needs to be provided. And you can definitely build in something that requires some type of notice to your neighbors if you're going to get it. I'm not aware of a community that's had anything in there regarding permission and we can look into it though.
Okay.
Kevin?
Can we get our hands on somebody like us that's already doing it and see what it looks like?
Mhm.
People that you know?
Mhm.
Because I'd love to see how they wrote it up, what it looks like, what we haven't thought of. And I think it might give us some more clarity.
So I can tell you firsthand, a few years ago, I went through that in the community I used to work in. So, yeah.
So yes, we have some really good data. This one tonight was basically to find out, are we willing to go down that road? To get the data and see what others are doing and if we have the will to put something like this in. So I think we've done a good job of giving some of our stories and our feelings. So
I think in addition, maybe to that sort of the data, the feedback, whatever, other people trying it, just kind of their anecdotal experience since they've pulled the trigger on it. How much of a pain has it been?
do we have any farmers in the room that know about chickens? Okay, so from everybody's perspective, are we good with going down the road and just considering and getting some information for us to actually consider? If we're not, then we should say we're not right now. But if you're okay, then how do I do this, Brian? Just a consensus, like shake of a head, or what do we need to do?
Yeah, well, I would say that right now, I think unless Tim kicks me and says I'm wrong, I think that we've got what we need. I haven't heard anybody said, let's just shut it down. It's just get us some more information. How are other communities dealing with it? What are some of the ordinances look like?
Perfect. Everybody good with that? Shake your head. Yes, okay. Okay. Next, Waunakee Westport Joint Plan Commission update, JPC agenda. Anything, Tim, other than?
So this is going to be a bit of a rerun. Tomorrow's meeting, there are 4 things. One is a consult for a cell tower just west of the intermediate school on the north side of Woodland. And then the school site plan, and then the 2 annexations will go as those portions of those areas are in the joint planning area. So.
Okay. Any comments or questions, JPC members? Everybody good? No, we're good?
Move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Joe Zitzelberger. Second by Brian Malish. Any other comments? Call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thanks, everybody. And for those in the crowd, could you hear us pretty well? Yes, an improvement? Yes, okay, great. Thank you.